Warning: the five may contain discussions on topics such as death, suicide, rape, addiction, and abuse. Although these topics are approached in a therapeutic manner, they still may have triggering effects on some individuals. Viewer discretion is advised.
Human beings are crafted through experience. Each person, from the closest of friend to the most random of stranger, has a unique story crafted by the ultimate experience that we call life. Welcome to the five. The same five questions, a completely different experience every time.
I met today's guest in a very roundabout way. So originally I found this amazing piece of artwork on Instagram and I reached out to the artist, which was AEIOU Art, also known as Bobby Alexio, who was a guest on my show a while back. And I just wanted to let him know that his artwork was amazing. And I sparked up a friendship with him. And then he ended up telling me that the artwork that I admired so much was actually a really good friend of his. And he was a really cool guy and I should meet him. So that's when I met Rob. He's an amazing guy. He's got a very strong, positive energy. He's just one of those good vibe guys. He's really funny. And so we became really good friends and we probably talked a few years now on Instagram. So I'm really excited to bring him on today and let you guys meet him. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you so much for the introduction. We've known each other for 3 years now, and we've never done a video call. This is the first video call that we've ever done. We've always just by text, and it's about time. I think it's about time that we took this call. My name is Rob. I live in Australia, but I am Canadian, and I've been living in Australia for going on almost 12 years now. I moved here back in 2011 and never looked back. But back in Canada, I grew up in a small town, so I'm a country boy, where we, hunting, fishing, all that fun stuff that you do in a small town in the country. Beautiful town called Smithers, BC. And yeah, once I graduated, I moved to Vancouver, where I spent 4 years. Jumped into a relationship right off the bat, my first gay relationship, and um, it was just kind of jumping into someone else's world, right? There was never an opportunity for me to kind of create my own identity, make my own friends. It was just jumping into a relationship with someone. And, he was 20 years older than me as well. Beautiful man, and I learned so much. But yeah, we moved to Australia together, and after 4 years, we ended up splitting up while we're here. And that was kind of the first time where I was able to, I guess, make my own identity as a single gay man. I made my own friends. I got into my own health routine. I was working at a cafe, and I just fell in love with the lifestyle and the people, the culture, the weather, and it just felt like home. It just felt like my heart belonged in Australia. So after my 6 months, I went back to Canada for about a year and a half just to save money, bartended, and I think I saved up like $12,000, $10,000 or something, and then I moved back and started going to school. And yeah, what a ride it's been. That 11 years, a lot has happened in 11 years. But I've lived quite a good life, and well, I guess since leaving my hometown, I've lived quite a good life for being only 33. I've done a lot, which is really exciting, but it hasn't been all smooth sailing. There's been the ups and the downs, like everyone in life. So yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell.
So I think we're going to get to hear a little bit about some of those ups and downs today. You know the drill. I'm going to ask you five questions. Just answer them however you like. Take your time. And are you ready?
Let's do it.
What's the scariest thing that's ever happened to you?
All right. So I had to do some digging on this one. I would have to say 2 years ago, back in, I think it was June 2021. My mother has suffered with an illness for many, many, many years, right? And obviously in Australia, so far away, there's very little I can do and feel a bit powerless. with, just being able to help her. So I it was June. I was walking through Centennial Park in Sydney with a friend of mine, and obviously, you always feel that worry of getting a phone call or something, right? When your parents aren't well, and it just sits there, sits in the back of your head. So we're walking through the the park, and I received a text from I think it was my mom's partner. And the only first part I read was, "Hey Rob, your mom's been taken to hospital in an ambulance." And that's the only part I read, and my heart just sank. And for me, like, this is just gonna bring up a lot of emotions, so get ready. For me, it was, I guess, the fear and what got me really scared was, um, I wasn't gonna be able to say goodbye, I guess. So, yeah, it was just, that initial feeling just rereading those first few words was, yeah, just made me scared I wasn't gonna be able to say goodbye. That she was taken to hospital, her breathing, she was having good difficulties breathing, and yeah, so it was just a rush of emotion, right? So I think that was the scariest. I think that falls to a lot of people is not being able to say goodbye, and I think going through COVID, so many people experienced that with what we all went through. Like, there's so many people that lost loved ones, and never got to say goodbye, or their parents end up in the hospital with COVID and they're on support. And, you have to fly to another country to see them, but then you get put in your own quarantine for 2 weeks. And, some people's parents passed away while they're in quarantine. One of my closest friends had asked, his mom passed away while he was, I think, 4 days from getting out of his own quarantine to see his mom in the hospital and she passed away. So it's, I think it's such a fear for a lot of people. Unfortunately, so many people had to go through that. But Um, that that was probably the scariest thing that's happened to me in my life. I live a pretty easy life, so I don't do anything too crazy. Um, but yeah, when it comes to mom, like, a lot of what I've gone through is gonna be around my mom.
I understand that. I actually My parents were older in life when they had me. I'm pretty sure I was an accident in life, actually, because when my dad would drop me off at school, there would be like teachers ask him, they're like, "Is this your grandson?" And he's like, "It's the grandest son I have," and everything. And so now it's like anytime I get like a message or a text from my sisters when it's like outside of the normal hours that you would get, like, the phone rings and it's my sister, I just pick it up with that dread. It's that feeling of dread, because it's like you said, it's kinda it's you try not to think about it, but it's always sitting on your shoulders.
It's tough, all right? And living with that fear for so long, especially being so far away.
So, moving on, what's the weirdest thing that's ever happened to you?
Another one I had to do some digging. But, I went all the way back to my childhood with this one, and it's kind of a funny story. So back when I was 14, 15, 16, I worked in a restaurant called Boston Pizza. Don't know if you're familiar with it. It's a pizza chain. I think they're in America, but yeah, they do pizza, ribs, burgers, right, pastas, the whole shebang. So I was so I obviously started as a dishwasher, and then I moved into the kitchen, and I'd always be on close, and we'd be finishing up around 1 or 2 in the morning. And what we always used to do, and this is back when I was a pretty big stoner, I was smoking weed all the time, and so a group of us, whoever closed, we'd always go back to a friend of ours named Duffy, and this tiny little shack, and we'd go back to his place, and we would just get really, really stoned. And yeah, and then for the first time, I probably left around 4 or 5 in the morning, right? Completely just oblivious and um munted. It's a word we use in Australia when you're really messed up. Munted. So, um, I was walking home and I looked over my shoulder and I saw this black figure following me. It wasn't like a human, it was like just a big black figure that was following me. And I started getting really paranoid and I kept looking over my shoulder and it would move into the bush and then it would come back onto the street and I'm walking and I kept looking over my shoulder and I'm all like, what's going on here right now? So I'm coming up to my house and I'm like, I can't have this thing know where I live. So I ended up walking an extra 6 to 8 blocks to try and lose whatever it was, just so it wouldn't know where I live. So I like pretended I wasn't going to my house. And yeah, it was so bizarre. I don't know if it was a human. I don't know if I was just tripping out. But yeah, I ended up walking all the way until then I came into the back door of my house and like locked everything up. And to this day, I never know what it was. I don't know if it was real or if I was just tripping out, but I don't think it was human. I think I was just I don't know if it was hallucinating. Bizarre, but that's definitely the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me. As far as just obviously it was drug induced, but that's what we did. But also we would do that every night after work. We'd just go to his place and get stoned. And unfortunately, this night I was followed home by something. So yeah,
I do like that you were like, I would rather it not know where I live, so I'm not gonna go to the safety of my home, but I'm just gonna continue a jaunt around the neighborhood with this thing following me.
said like I'm gonna follow. Go. I don't know. I'm gonna go somewhere else, but I can't know where I live. So God, yeah. I think I was like 15 when that happened.
We can move on to what's the most memorable moment of your life so far?
I'd say the first one happened uh I think growing when you growing up as a gay kid, my father wasn't very supportive. He was a very angry man. He was physical with us, not to the point of like beating us, but he did a lot of spanking, right? And me and my siblings kind of grew up in fear of him, unfortunately. So when I moved to Vancouver and I jumped into this relationship with a man that's 40 years older, 40 years older, 20 years older than me. You can imagine how that would go down with your dad, who's kind of already homophobic, in a small town, right? So I I wrote. My partner told me in order for us to move on, I needed to come out to my parents. I needed to, get this off my shoulders. So I spent the next week writing a letter to my dad. And it was the hardest letter I've ever written as I was just rehashing a lot of memories from my childhood and putting them on paper. And it was just a letter of me writing, being angry at him. And, you did this to me and you made me feel this way and you did this and this and this. So it took me a week because I would be writing and I would just start crying and my partner would have to come hold me because there was just a lot of shit coming out of me. So I sent the letter and my dad received it and we didn't talk for a year and a half. People my family was really on top of him, calling, telling him what the hell's wrong with you. This is your son. For my dad, it was what my sisters described. The look on his face was like somebody died in the family. He blamed everyone else for my being gay, for me being in an older relationship with a man. But yeah, we didn't talk for a year and a half. So I'm with my partner Wayne, and I wanted to bring him home to my hometown and introduce him to everyone. And it was my dad's ex-wife's son's graduation party, which we were going to go to. So I brought him home, and Wayne's already met my grandparents, and he's met my stepmom, and a majority of my family. And they all fell in love with him. And we were at this graduation party. There's a barbecue, and my dad's going to be arriving at some point with a present for Garrett. And everyone knew what was going on, right? There was this buzz in the air. And, we're enjoying the party, and then my dad rocks up. So And like the moment, I haven't seen my dad in like over a year and a half, maybe 2 years. We haven't talked since my letter. And so we're in the back porch and he comes into the front door and he goes in the kitchen. And I'm like, how am I going to do this? And do I go in first? And then I talk to him. And so I go into the kitchen and I'm like, hey, dad. And he's like, hey, tough guy. I'm like, how are you? He's like, yeah, fine, good. And I'm like, all right. Did you want to meet Wayne? And he's like, yeah, sure, whatever, sure. So Wayne comes in, and Wayne's amazing. Wayne's just like this energy, like everyone loves him. He comes in, he's like, "Oh, Mr. Goddard, it's so nice to meet you. I've heard so many amazing things about you." And I'm standing back, and I'm not breathing. So, I'm standing. My sister's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah." And she's like, "You need to breathe. You need to breathe." And I'm like my face was white, the whole shabam. And I don't remember what happened after that. I think I just blacked out. Uh, but the next part I remember was we were standing on the front lawn and my dad was getting in the truck. And as he drove away, it was like all this emotion came out of me and I just completely broke down and I was crying so hard and my nose started bleeding and I was just a complete mess. But it was just, I guess, years of holding this pressure on my shoulders of being gay and that moment and it finally happened and it was it was definitely from my childhood the the most impactful. It was just a weight lifted off my shoulder. And I kind of looked through my life and there's a few things in my life that, you know, has been a weight on my shoulder. And I guess as I got older, the second most memorable thing that's happened to me is being in Australia here. It's been it was 10 years of just trying to get a visa. And I tried every way to do it on my own. I'm a very independent person. I'm an entrepreneur. I love building businesses. And I was studying personal training at the time and building a business. So I was going for the 457 visa, which is this free scale businesses, and personal training was on the list. So I was building this business in hopes of getting my own visa through my own business, right? Being independent, not having to depend on anyone, which is, the ultimate goal. And God, I was in a relationship and I there was an announcement that they were going to be canceling the 457 visa and taking it away. And they were also taking the personal training off the list. So it was just like this whole thing that, the visa's gone. I'm like, everything I've been building is just gone out the window. Like, there's fellow students that are like, well, I'm going home now because I can't be here. So I was trying to do all these other ways. My partner at the time didn't he wanted to do de facto and I did not want to do de facto. I'm like, I could not think of anything worse than being in a relationship and having a visa hanging over my head. And and he was traveling overseas and I um was going through all this emotion because I heard about the visa. And so I'm like, I'm leaving Australia. I got into a big temper tantrum. Like I practically had a big temper tantrum. Um, I was stubborn. I'm like, I'm leaving Australia. I hate it. The government's fucked. Like they keep changing the rules. I'm just done. Right. And my friend's like, what about this? I'm like, no, I'm done. I'm leaving. I'm starting like canceling my memberships in places. And I was avoiding my partner at the time and he said, "What's going on?" And I ended up jumping on a call and I was crying and I'm like, "I'm leaving Australia." Right. And I loved this guy. Like I wanted to marry him. And he's like, "No, you can't leave. I want to marry you. I want to spend my life with you." And I'm sorry. I need to do this for me. I can't be here anymore. I'm like, I'm done. And so, I ended up um, breaking up with him while he was traveling overseas by himself, which is the last thing anyone should do and would want to do. And it was just, and that was why I was avoiding him. I was like, I can't. And I'm like, I don't want to be that guy. but he like just came out of me. So we kept chatting and we ended up getting back together because I ended up figuring out a way to go through my massage business. And it was on the short list for massage therapy. So I was like, got back with my partner. I'm like, oh, I can figure out a way to stay here independently. I don't need you. Like we can be together. Like I get it through this way. I found out that I would have to move to Tasmania as the visa I was going for is only done by state sponsorship. And Tasmania was the only state that would sponsor massage therapy. So I'd have to move my company to Tasmania for 2 years or move somewhere rural and get a company to sponsor me for 2 years. Now, both options I was just like not down for because I'm like, I'm in a relationship. I don't want to live in Sydney. They're both really inconvenient. Byron Bay actually fell on the list for places I could go, which is not a terrible place, but getting working for a company, uh, I just didn't trust the government. The government lost my trust because they kept changing the rules all the time. They kept taking visas away, putting new visas on. So I ended up sabotaging my relationship because I think subconsciously I knew I would have to go to de facto. And I love this guy so much that I didn't want to put a visa over our relationship. Like it was, I just felt like if I go down this visa route, it's gonna fucking fall apart. Like it's just gonna go down the rabbit hole because I'll mess it up. I'll get in my head. Everything will feel like a job, which it did. But so I sabotaged it and I started looking at our relationship and looking at all the differences and how they would fare up against a visa. Right? I'm like, oh, he's really into history. I'm not so much into history. How is that going to look in the visa? Oh, his whole family's very musical. I'm not musical. How's that going to look on the visa? I was a crazy lady. I picked our relationship apart, and in the end, I ended up breaking up with him, and the reason was I'm like, we just don't have that in common, and it was all driven by the visa, and unfortunately, and it's terrible. Like, I love this guy, but it was just like you have this. I was going through these emotions. I break up with him, but like, no, I still want to be with you, but I just don't want to have a visa hanging over our relationship. So we ended up splitting up, and you know, obviously he had enough. I dumped him a couple times now. You know, it's fair. Like he's like, no, I'm sorry, like we're done, but I love you and all that stuff. So I ended up jumping into another relationship a few months later. And that breakup was really hard for me, but I ended up going into the de facto relationship with someone who lived in my building. And we started dating and things were really good. We had a lot more in common. And, deep down, I'm like, I'm going to have to ask for this visa at some point. And, you know, I probably waited a couple months because I'm like, my clock's ticking. I'm like, I can't wait too long. I'm running out of time. I need to know if this is going to happen or not. And, you know, we just had a really lovely weekend away together. And I asked him if he would sponsor me. And he's like, yeah. But he's like, you're not just dating me to get a visa, are you? I'm like, no, I really like you. And I did. But I think a lot of subconsciously, the visa was driving a lot of my decisions. And I know that now. And I was in survival mode. And, I did like him. We had an amazing relationship. I had met his parents, or his mom was amazing. And yeah, so we started this visa process and it was right away, you're 2, 3 months into a relationship and suddenly you're registering your relationship, your joint bank account, you're moving in together. Uh, and it was just everything was rushed, everything was forced. It's like, oh, we got to take photos for the visa. We got to, do this for the visa. We got to your parents. We got to take photos with your parents for the visa. It was everything I didn't want to do, everything I feared. Because I want to be in a relationship. I want to be in a relationship. I don't want to be questioning everything. And it was just very rushed, and we started resenting each other. We started pulling apart, and the t- the day he moved in and out, we had a conversation. I was like, "Do you think we we should start over as friends and kind of work our way back in because we're clearly dividing here and we're not getting along and we're fighting. Um, and that didn't go down so well because obviously he just moved in and I'm like, let's just be friends, right? And obviously that just sounds horrible because he's like, you used me. And I'm like, no, but I'm like, I don't know how to navigate this. But it was little things. We'd sit in the car and I'd put my hand on his leg and I'd be like, am I putting my hand on his leg or is the visa putting my hand on his leg? And or we'd be being intimate and, am I having sex with him or is the visa having sex with him? And same thing with him. He'd be thinking the same things. Like, is he only having sex with me for the visa or is he really into me? Right. So these are the thoughts. But imagine that, but with everything. Everything you do, the visa is like, am I doing this? Or is the visa doing this? Every time we can argue or call immigration on you, that fear will always be there. If I get a visa, I get a visa. If I don't, I don't. I have to go back home. For me, I wanted to be in Australia. This was home for me. I'm like, I'm fighting my ass off. So we stayed together for 3 years, going through this visa process, and it was tough. It was definitely tough. We had some big fights. There's multiple times he leave, and I didn't make it easy for him. Like and both had our downfalls. We were very, I guess, I was a very big extrovert. I was very present on social media. He wasn't. He was very much more insecure than I was, right? So, seeing guys comment on all my social activities, right? Being, you can understand the comments we can get from some guys can be pretty sexual, I guess. And he couldn't handle it. And so he would like unfollow me on social media and all that stuff. So, but there was also a lot of growth in the 3 years. Um, but towards the end of my visa, I was a crazy lady. I was obsessed with this visa thing. All I talked about was the visa. It was, you know, I'm like, oh, I'm just waiting for my visa. What's new? I'm just waiting for my visa. Like I was a crazy lady. I was absolutely nuts with this whole visa thing. And I think back and I'm like, I probably drove my friends up the wall with how much I talked about the visa. So the day I got the email, it was from immigration. I'm like, oh my God, this is the email. And then I got my visa grant for permanent residency. And it's weird when you spent 10 years working towards something and you've had that weight lifted on or sitting on your shoulders. Every decision that you've kind of lived your life around this visa. You've been dictated by this visa on how you live your life in this 10 years of visa. But being in Australia, I got that email and it was just suddenly gone. It was just like, boom, what visa? Like no more visa. Like that thought, that fear, the emotion, everything that I had to my shoulders was just like a snap of the finger was just gone. It was just an amazing feeling. And it was like, I'm finally able to just be here in Australia. And, I went through hell and back to get there, but I got it. And um, that feeling is so memorable for me when, I suppose memories, it was just such a release. Uh, and yeah, so now it's been almost 2 years since I've had my permanent residency. Now I'm in the process of applying for my citizenship, which is exciting. But God, you know, what a battle. Australia doesn't make it easy. God. And I hurt people along the way, and I'm not proud of it. I became someone I really wasn't proud of. I was very selfish during that time because all I wanted was because I was in survival mode. And I almost looked at all our relationships and I assessed how can you get me closer to where I need to be, right? And I hurt people, and the guy that I broke up with, who I was madly in love with, still it still bothers me to this day because I'm like I knew how I felt, I knew how he felt. It was very mutual, and I made some really poor choices. But at the same time, I don't regret it because I wasn't happy with the person I became when I was going through the de facto relationship. It was all about me. It was all about me and getting that visa. I would lie, cheat, do whatever I needed to do to get that visa. And I did get it in the end, but unfortunately it cost me a few relationships.
That's understandable. I mean, you are literally fighting to be in what you're choosing as your home.
Yep.
So, like, if you don't get to stay, you're going to have to start over completely somewhere else. You're probably one of the alpha types that when they see their goal, they go for it. I understand that and everything. And a lot of times you get super focused on that one thing. And sometimes you look back behind you after you obtain that goal and you're like, oh, I probably didn't go about this the right way. But you're also, I mean, there's big stakes for you not getting to stay. And also, it's surprising, I guess, just because you are from Canada. So you would think it would be easier to get an Australian citizenship.
I know. I was like, I'm contributing to society. I'm keeping your citizens healthy through my programs. I'm like, what else do I have to do? But yeah, after I got that visa, there was a lot of reflecting and um, but I guess in that the last 3 years of getting my visa, I there was a lot of growth that happened through that process. I started in network marketing, selling products, and I turned my health around. And that started my self-development journey, and, you know, I wasn't the same person, in 3 years down the line that I was when I first started that relationship. Like, I'd grown so much, and even my partner at the time said that, you know, it's like, he hated me. Like, he wanted me out of Australia. Like, that's how bad it got, and I don't blame him. Like, I was an ugly person. Reflecting I was able to do after the whole process, and I spoke to him after the whole matter, and I apologized. I'm like, "I'm so sorry for everything I put you through," and I'm like, "I'm so grateful for everything you've done for me. You've given me my life here in Australia, and I can't repay you enough. Like, it's just you're the reason I'm here, and, thank you so much." So, um, yeah, I'm forever grateful for putting up with me in that 3 years. 'Cause, I didn't make it easy. Was, uh, I was a bit of an asshole, just to cut it correct. But yeah, I did it though, right? And that's the thing. I I made it through as hard as it was. I survived, and I have to give myself a pat on the back for that because, yeah, you gotta go through these life challenges, and that was, um I always told myself, "If I can get through this, I'm like, I'll be fine." Like, you know, you're gonna get through this no matter what. Like, you just keep pushing, do what you have to do. So, and here I am, you know, now permanent resident and, you know, s somewhat stress-free, I guess. Well, just no visa stress, which is really nice.
This is the weighty question of the knot, which is, what's the saddest thing that's ever happened to you?
Oh, you ready for this one? Ah, God. Alright. So, that phone call that I talked about being the scariest thing with my mom ending up in hospital. Um, After speaking with my sister and, you know, I was like, "What should I do? Should I come home?" She's like, "You probably should, right? You probably should come home for this." And I'm like, "All right." So I had just got my visa, right? And I had planned to move up to Queensland and just reconnect with me because I'm like, I was a crazy bitch. I'm like, "Who's Rob? I need to find Rob again. Let's move up to Queensland where it's warm and be in the tropical life and just be on the beach because that was my happy place. I just wanted to be on the ocean, watch the sunrises, and just be in that moment. So that was my plan. I was even up in Brisbane, where I am now, and I was looking at apartments, and I found one. And we're all still kind of in lockdown. We're kind of still going through COVID, and I had what happened. Um, Yeah, so it all happened in 1 week. So the week I technically planned to, go to Queensland, the border shut. So the borders between New South Wales and Queensland shut. So I was like, all right, well, I'm like, can't do that. But that's like a couple of days later, I got a phone call. I got another phone call about my mom ending up back in hospital. And it was more serious. So I made that decision to obviously pack up my life, put it all in storage, and go home and look after mom. Right. So I had to go through all these hoops to get home. I had to call her doctors, I had to call the hospital, like the doctor's notes to, um, show the government here that I was going home for a legitimate reason. Because you actually had to apply to leave Australia at that time. They weren't just letting you fly home and do whatever. You had to go through this big application process and provide a whole bunch of evidence. So it was doctor's letters, birth certificates, proof that it was my mom, all this stuff. And then I had to get other doctor's letters to let me skip quarantine when I got into Canada and to allow me to do my quarantine when I was at home with my mom to look after her. And luckily, I was approved all right away. But there are some people that probably applied about 60 to 70 times and they just kept getting denied. Some of their parents would have cancer and they kept getting denied. But, so I'm grateful I got accepted and I was able to go home. So my partner at the time, Carl, his mom wasn't doing well. And the day I left um, was July 22nd. And we we got Carl had crawled into bed about 1 a.m. and woke me up. And he had just received a phone call that his mom had passed away in hospital. And that was the day I was leaving back to Canada. And we were in lockdown. Ah. And I had to leave him on this day that his mom died in court in lockdown all by himself um, to go home and look after my mom. We and we
Take your time, Rob.
it just tore my heart out. You can't. Someone just lost their mom, and you have to leave them alone. And I loved his mom. His mom was like a mother to me. We had such good banter. She was my mom in Australia, and and we said goodbye and to Canada. Um, just getting the news of his mom passing away, and so that was the beginning of my 10-month trip back to Canada. And I got back to Canada and I was in quarantine with my mom. And she had just gotten out and she was very frail. Um, my mom suffered with alcoholism for many, many years, and not a lot of people know that. So when she got out of hospital, while she was in hospital, they had to pump about 6 liters out of her the first time. And that's how bad it was. She didn't know where she was. She was delirious. Right. I did a couple FaceTimes when I was still in Australia with her, and she looked horrible. Like she looked absolutely horrible. And so when I got home, um, she could barely walk. She could walk, but she'd have to hold on to things. She was just so frail. Um, and talking with her, it was like she wasn't present. Um, trying to have a conversation, it was just she was only half there, which was really hard. And obviously, anyone who has dealt with someone who's an addict understands that, the things you don't do, and you don't put the red zone and do all these things, and um ah, so it was the day of Carl's mom's funeral, and I was gonna be watching it virtually, and that day I had found a bunch of alcoholic or bottles in the camper van, and they were my mom's partners, and I emptied them all out and I chucked them, and I told her that I had done so. And just before I'd gone out to watch this the funeral, um she pulls me aside and she's like, "Oh, I just spoke to Ralph, and he's not happy that you dumped out his alcohol." And I lost it. I lost it on her, and I was swearing, I'm like, like, he doesn't fucking love you, he's fucking killing you, blah blah blah. I hated this guy. I hated this guy. And so I was watching the funeral, and I'm bawling my eyes out already, like, it hasn't even started. And then ah, Carl walked in, and he didn't even want to go to the funeral because he can't deal with that stuff. And he walked in, and he just sat at the front, and he just sat there with his head down the entire funeral, and didn't look up once. Far out. Oh God. And at the end of the funeral, they all went up to lay flowers on the coffin. And as he went up, he put his flower on the casket, and he just collapsed. It was so hard to watch that I couldn't be there. And he just sat there for 5, 10 minutes just crying at the coffin of his mother. And, and I was so angry and so sad because I was like, my mom, you know, she suffered with this alcoholism, and she's just doesn't see it, and it was so frustrating. And I'm like, I'm about to go watch my partner's mother's funeral, and you're worried about your partner's alcohol. And um so that was tough. That was um going through that. Then over time, I was dealing with my mom stuff, and you know, she started getting a bit better. Um I only had about 3 weeks of quarantine with her, and she was walking better. I was taking her up and down the driveway. I was walking with her, and slowly, she started getting a little more strength, and conversations um, were just flowing a little more easy. She was more present, um, and it was actually talking about most memorable moments, this was kind of one that happened where my mom was a big stoner as well. And um, when I was 16, I got sent to rehab because I was a stoner and blah, 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 right? But before I left, I um I knew she had a stash, like a little box with her like her pipes, her rollies, and all that stuff. And I'm like, well, I can't have any. I'm like, you can't have any. So I ended up taking it, going in her bedroom and give it to a friend while I was away in rehab. And so when at the house and I asked her, I'm like, do you still smoke weed? And she's like, yeah. Do you want some? And I'm like, you know what? Why not? Like, let's do this moment of me smoking weed with my mom. We're like, let's just go and do it. So we're sitting on the porch and we're smoking a joint and we're chatting and she was telling me a story um about our dogs and as she was telling me this story, she started laughing. And and this was the first time I had seen my mom laugh in probably, God, 15 to 20 years. And I sat there and I just took it in. It was just one of those moments that I'll never forget. It was just the first time seeing my mom laugh, telling the story. So I forgot to throw that one in there, that other question. But um September came around and my partner's dog, Bentley, we had a cat and a dog. And they Bentley and Brody, and they're best mates. So my cat was a Tonkinese, he was like a little Shih Tzu. They were best friends. And when I left, my cat went to a good mate of mine to look after. And but before I left, the dog wasn't doing so well. Like there was something going on with him. And this dog was Carl's world. And unfortunately, he just deteriorated. He got worse and worse and worse. And and Carl was taking him into the vet and doing all these drugs, and he was looking for a naturopath and doing all that stuff, and nothing was um, helping him. And then got a call from Carl one morning. I was back in Vancouver now, and um, and he said Bentley's gone. So he had taken the dog. Bentley had just gotten so bad, so he said the day he took him to the vet, he couldn't even walk, and he took him in and he dropped him off and he left. He wasn't there for him putting him down. He just 'cause Carl can't do that stuff. He can't deal with that stuff, and I get it, and some people can't. Um, so he just, this dog was his world. 8 years, anyone who owns a pet and goes through this, like, you've got to understand. So he's now lost his mom, and he's just lost his dog, and he's in lockdown, right, by himself. And I was just like, another thing. It just sucks. And this was September. So the next few months, obviously, I'm going through the emotional roller coaster of dealing with my mom and all this stuff. And my mom had come to Christmas, um, spend Christmas in Vancouver with me, which was amazing, right? It was, and she had relapsed a couple times in that period. But we spent a week and a half, 2 weeks in Vancouver together, and she stayed with me. And she demanded I get a tree, not a fake one. I had to go get a real tree, put it in my apartment, and she brought all the Christmas ornaments down down from Smithers, and we decorated the tree together, and we took her shopping, and like just all these amazing things. We didn't want to do presents; we just wanted to create all these memories. And we even cooked a big turkey dinner for Christmas, right? Um, and it was just such an amazing time of memory making, that Christmas. And it was the first Christmas we'd actually spent together in over 10 years as well. So it was a very special time for me and her. Um, and so, yeah, we did that, had an amazing Christmas. And then she left on Boxing Day, and my auntie came and picked her up and took her back to to the airport, and that was the last trauma. I said goodbye, and she left, and then it was getting time, so I'm like, I need to go back to Australia, right? So I had booked my tickets to leave March 11th. And, I was still chatting with my mom once in a while, and I knew like she'd go really quiet, and I knew she'd relapse, all that stuff. Um, 2 weeks before I depart to go back to Australia, I get a phone call from my mate that's looking after my cat, and saying that he had passed away. So he was already having some abnormal breathing. My friend was taking him in and looking after him, and and all this stuff, and then he went downhill, and he said, "I'm taking him in to get X-rays done and blood work," and I was trying to organize head insurance. And this guy was amazing. You've seen my social media in the past, and he's the blue-eyed, cross-eyed chunk, and he was pretty epic. Um, and so I just and the reason I wanted to go back to Australia when I did is because like I miss my cat. I don't want to go home and start my life in Brisbane and do all these amazing things. And so yeah, 2 weeks before I left, I got the phone call. He had a heart attack when he was on the X-ray table. Um, so I was like, I just lost my cat. Like, you know, what else needs to happen? I'm like, God, I just can't catch a breath here. I'm like, it's first my partner's mom, then the dog, and then my cat. Right. So, called my mom and I told her, and she loved my cat. I'd always send her photos. And then, yeah, so I left Australia and I flew home, and I flew into Sydney, and I'd gone to my friend's place, and where who was looking after the cats, and he had his ashes and everything. So we ended up burying him under a plant in the garden that he always used to play in, which is really nice. We had a little cute little ceremony and stuff like that, um, and then I flew up to Brisbane, where I was staying with a really close friend of mine, and we went to look at a dog that he was wanting to get a little rescue. And on the way home, this is probably like 3 days out, 3 days. Oh God, yeah, I was probably in Sydney for like 2 days, and then came up to Brisbane, and then the next day. So we're looking at March 14th, March March 15th, and we're driving home, and we're just talking, and I'm like, it's really nice to be up here, back in Australia, and I'm really excited to start my life, but it's hard at the same time because I'm like, I still have to live with that worry about my mom's phone call. Right? If something's gonna happen to her, I'm like, I can't be in there, and it's just hard being so far away. And the next um, the next morning, I got a phone call from my uncle, um, saying that my mom had passed away. So the anniversary's in 2 days. So
I'm sorry, Rob.
at first I was numb. Um, and then obviously all the emotion comes out. Ah, and what had happened is she had an aneurysm, and her partner found her in not a great state. She had gone to bed that night. She said goodnight, and he woke up in the morning and to go to work, and he was like, he just had this gut feeling he should go check on her. And he walked in and he found her laying back on the bed, and obviously an aneurysm is when you bleed out. And the state he found her was not pretty. Um, and it's not a state anybody after a 26-year relationship to find their partner. It's one thing to find them fall like asleep, but not the way he did. Um, and Wow. So at that point, I just kind of checked out. I, oh, I just had 4 deaths in 10 months, 4 things that were super close to me, and I think that was just the final straw for me. I was just like, I'm done trying to fight this and catch my breath, and I'm like, I'm checking out. Um, honestly, the universe is so fit to me right now. I'm like, it's challenging me beyond. Um, but I didn't spiral at all. Like, I'm not that kind of person to spiral, but I was just like, I'm just gonna trust what's happening to me is happening to me for a reason. And um, I went through the process of, um, you know, I ended up flying back in about a month, and I organized my mom's memorial and everything. And we just had a wake at the house, and you know, I organized bookmarks with a beautiful poem on the back because she loved reading. My God, Danielle Steele was her favorite author. And if anyone knows Danielle, my mom had probably every single book of hers. It was ridiculous. But I organized, envelopes full of her favorite flower seeds and handed them out at the wake so people could plant them. And we had a beautiful time. And, a lot of her old nursing friends came. And, it was a really good time. But then when I moved back to Australia, I came back. Um, I always told myself that I'll get through this. Um, and that's temporary. Um, and I'm grateful because when I started my self development journey, I've done so much work on myself, and I'm so grateful that I did because I'm like, I don't think I would have gone through this as well as I did had I not done the work on myself beforehand. Um, and it's I think what was tough is you think a death in the family. Like my sister and I didn't have we're not super close, but like you think a death in the family would bring you closer together, and it didn't. But it probably drove us apart further, unfortunately. And same with my dad's relationship and mine. Um, but it's like it was just 10 months of just an emotional roller coaster. And my mom's thing was just the last straw. So this whole year being back up in Australia has just been all about recovery and getting my health back. I'm an emotional eater at the best of times. So like I ate my feelings so much for going through that. Like chicken wings, pizza, sushi, give it to me. I'm all about it. Um, and but I just told myself it's temporary, right? Go through what you need to go through, feel what you need to go through, feel what you need to feel. You know, just feel it, right? Don't avoid this grief that you're going through. Um, it is tough right now. But even me going home, right? Even before I went back home, I told myself, I'm like, going home is going to be really tough, right? Going into your mom's house is going to be really tough, but it's going to be so therapeutic for you. There's going to be a moment of growth here. Going into the bedroom where my mom was at, I'm like, it was just all these things. I told myself, this is going to be another tough spot for you, right? But do it. You need to do it because it's gonna give you an opportunity to grow in some way or form. Um, and I would have those conversations with myself when I was going home. Um, and it was tough. Like I didn't just go home and jump into my mom's bedroom and be like, cool. Right. I sat in the living room and I probably sat there for probably 2, 3 hours and I would cry and then I'd be fine. Then I'd cry again. Right. I'd just go through it until her partner's sister came and was with me. And, when I was ready, she walked in with me and I went through it. So it's, been through these really tough times. I'm grateful for the work that I've done because it's given me the tools to get through these things. You're right. And I think a lot of people struggle with that part. It's, something bad happens and it's all doom and gloom. And they just sit in this really hard space. Um, Without that thought of I'm gonna get out of this, right? It's all they see is just it's darkness, it's sadness, it's my life is horrible, blah 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 blah. Um, I think I accepted that things are shit right now, but it's temporary. Right. Time is gonna heal. You'll get through this, learn from it, grow from it, right? Go with it. You need to go through. Like if you want to eat pizza, eat a pizza. If you want to, you know, cry, cry. So yeah, so when you ask about the saddest thing, it was hard to nail one thing. It was just 10 months. That was like a 10-month period of just hell. I know I would talk to people and they'd be like, fuck, you've just had quite the ride. I'm like, like, are you okay? I'm like, I'm good. Like, but even go through it, like you see my social media and I'm a very positive guy, like you said earlier. I'm a very motivating and inspiring, and it's not me to put out shit media. Did get to a point where I was just like, you know what, I'm not okay. Right. And it was just something to be honest with. Like, I'm not, and I stopped it. Because we're so used to like, are you like, yeah, but I'm good. I'm like, no, I'm shit. Absolute shit. Life sucks. And it's just got to be honest at some point when you're going through a hard time because I think too many people, especially in our world, are scared with that honesty, and if they're going through a hard time, right, it's okay to not be okay. Uh, so yeah, that was 10 months of us going through it, right? But I I'm in such a good place. I've done so much growth, and I've gotten my health back, and yeah, it's weird that we're doing this phone call at the anniversary in 2 days. Um, so it's a weird week for sure. That was a ride.
That one, I'm still a little bit emotional there. I apologize. Not being able to be there when somebody you love is going through something like that, you know, with your partner, that's one of the hardest
Yeah.
things I can think of. I'm what my friends
Mhm.
say it and I say it. I'm like the paladin of our group. I'm the guy who runs
Yep.
in with the shield and tries to protect everybody from bad things and shield everybody's emotions and everything. And so some of the worst times is when you can't do that,
Mhm.
and emotional stuff you can't. You can shield people from a lot of physical stuff and everything, and you can be
Yep.
there for the emotional times. But even then, you can't protect somebody from the emotions. And then to not
Oh,
be able to
yeah.
be there at all, not to just even
Yeah, it
be
was,
able to give them a hug, it just it's so awful. And then, the pets and losing your mom and just I'm sorry, Rob.
it was just, I literally had a conversation with my mom 2 days prior, right? And she was just asking how everyone was and doing all that stuff. So, um, yeah, just, it's tough. And life is going to throw us these curveballs every once in a while. And, I think the biggest thing for me was, when someone dies in your family and and people tell you, I know what you're going through, right? And the comment used to make me angry, for some reason, and it frustrated me. I'm like, you don't know what I'm going through. You don't, because I think we all have. It's your mom, and it's like a piece of me died that day, right? And it's your mom, and there is a special, unique bond between a mother and a child that no one can relate to. Like you can't relate to my mom's passing because you don't know what our relationship was, and so I always think about that when people are like, "Oh, I know exactly what you're going through. I know it's tough. I've been there." I'm like, "Yeah, but you maybe on some level, but like your relationship with your mom is so different than mine." And um so yeah, and I think I tell people, even though I knew, when she left that day in Vancouver, um, I had a feeling that would be our last Christmas together, right? Like given how she's going, her health, and she's still relapsing. I'm like, chances are. Um, but where was I going with that? Yeah, you just, oh, I just completely had a brain fart. So much emotion.
There's a there's a lot of emotion and a lot of thoughts coming out of you right now. You can have a brain fart if you need to.
Thank you so much. Um, but yeah, you just kind of things are gonna happen, right? They're gonna it's just gonna let's just end up they're gonna throw you curveballs. So I'd say off that, just spend the time with make the memories, right? Create as much memories as you can.
I know there's a lot of people that don't have a great relationship with their parents and everything. I, the ones that do, and there's a lot of love and everything like that. It's like, uh, like Tom heals wounds, but like I'm not the same person I am after I lost my mom. I changed that day. I've not been the same person since. So it's just one of those things. It's like it is a life altering event, and you got to take all the time, all the time you need, and you need heal the way you need to heal. And
Even if you expect it, right? And this is the thing, like I've got friends who are like, oh yeah, he's got cancer, he doesn't have much long, and he's like, I'll be fine. I'm like, yeah, but even though you're expecting it, it still hits you. It still hits you. Like no matter how much you're expecting it, it's gonna, you're gonna cry. You're that emotion, like you might not expect it, but it's gonna come out of you. Unless you're just completely switched off emotionally, right? And some people are, they just avoid like my sister, she's she's built walls up and when we got that phone call, we jumped in the phone call, we both cried. Um, and then the second phone call, it was back to no emotion. Like it was just walls up again. Okay, now let's get onto the business side. Like it was just business mode again. Um, so yeah, but it's no matter how you're expecting, no matter how much you expect it, it's still tough.
I know you've given quite a bit of advice this and all the stories, which has been really good. I mean, amazing. It's like your bonus material. But now is the time. If you had one word of advice to give the people out there listening, what would it be?
One word, ooh, challenge me.
Well, not one word. Let's say not one word. Sorry. If you had one piece of advice.
Do the work on yourself. Like self development, read books, learn about people, learn about yourself, learn how to interact with people. It's just, I think there is so much material and so many tools out there that even though you don't use it in a day to day time, when certain events happen in your life, these tools that you've read about or you've learned will appear and you'll be able to handle that situation so much better, just like I did when I had to go home and deal with my mom's death and go into her room where she was found dead. Like these little situations, like it was learning how to have that self talk and that mindset and the conversation with myself that gave me the strength to be able to go through these things. Um, so yeah, my main advice was like, don't be afraid to do some self growth. Right, it's so important, and especially in today's world where social media is just so toxic. And I honestly don't believe that you can survive in today's world without working on yourself. Right, it's just the world's not the same way it was. Um, People need to be able to handle social media. Look at what was it, TikTok, and everyone's trying to be a celebrity on TikTok, right? Everybody, everything's coming out of the woodworks. But then you see the trolls and the haters, and then you see these people making videos. They're like, why is everyone so mean to me? Like, I don't understand this. Like, and it's just, if you're going to open yourself up for that stuff, you're going to get haters. Unfortunately, there's just those people out there. Um, or just switch off, it's like just get off social media, avoid it. But yeah, I say doing the work on yourself is just so important these days. And get out of your comfort zone. I'm gonna throw that one in there too. Get out of your comfort zone. All the exciting stuff happens outside of your comfort zone.
That's where you learn the most also is outside of your comfort zone.
100%, 100%. I'm one of those spontaneous people. Like, I will do just random shit, and I'm always keeping my friends on their toes because they're like, "Oh, what's Rob doing next? Oh, now he's living in this city. Oh, when is he going?" Like, I'm just spontaneous. Let's do it. I don't sit and think about it. I just question, like, go, make the decision. Um, pick up and randomly go to a country and travel. Like, you just, I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just gonna go and figure it out. It's fun. It's exciting. That's where you make the most memories without planning stuff, I guess. So the adventure is all there.
The best times I've ever had is when somebody says, "Hey, let's do this." And I'm like, "Okay, let's do it." And they're like, "Well, I'm in the future." And I'm like, "No, let's do it now." And they're like, "But I haven't got plans for it." And I'm like, "We don't need plans. Let's just go do it." I've jumped on a plane and went to England before. And, like I got to customs when they come and check my passport and everything in England. And the guy starts asking me, he's like, "What are you in England for?" And I'm like, "I just came to visit." And he's like, "Well, where are you staying?" And I was like, "I don't know yet." And he's like, "What are you doing here?" And I was like, touristy stuff, I guess. I was like, "I kind of want to see, like Big Ben and everything." And he looks at me like, "Are you serious? Like you just picked up and came here with no plans?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he really told me, he goes, "You need to think about things before you go and do this." And that's when I was like, "Oh, British people are a little uptight sometimes." But one of the best trips I ever had, I literally was lost the entire time. And being American, eating like European portions, I starved the whole time. And I just kind of wandered around eating everything I could eat and looking at everything I could look at. And I had an amazing time, but I had absolutely no plans.
I went to Bali spontaneously. It was my birthday. I'm like, booked a ticket. 2 days later, I flew out and didn't know anyone, met a local. He took me around. And then I ended up gay crashing a gay wedding. Like, I was like spontaneous and it was amazing, right? Had no plans and just went with the flow.
And if you've never really crashed a wedding out there, people, you should crash a wedding sometimes. Like, it is an amazing experience. I've done it too, and it is absolutely amazing. I've danced with the bride a few times at a wedding that I crashed. So go out there and do it. Challenge yourself. Like you said, get out of that comfort zone.
Absolutely.
Well, this was really amazing. I mean, it took us 3 years to actually sit down and talk with each other. I think we covered a few years of talks in this one talk.
Yeah.
A lot of emotion, a lot of crying.
Oh God. I knew this was gonna happen.
I think this one, there's so much that you talked about that there's other people out there going through. And, I think from each one of your stories, I think there's something that you can pull from and know that you're not alone out there in the world. So I really appreciate you having this talk with me today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, definitely brought that emotion. I knew it was gonna happen too. Like, I am not gonna get through this conversation without crying. So, like, here we go. Let's jump on this ride. So, thanks so much for having me.
I want to thank you all for listening today. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please subscribe and leave a 5-star review. Also, check out the video podcast at Handlebar ASMR on YouTube for extras.